Hi everyone, LazyFire here. Welcome to Battlefield 1. This is a game that came out in October of 2016. It was published by Electronic Arts, developed by DICE, like most Battlefield games. It's got a World War I setting. It's more of a theme, not very historically accurate, but it does take a lot of inspiration from real-life locations, uses real-life weapons, but it's taken a lot of video game liberties with a lot of that stuff. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the multiplayer, because that's where it really shines through. But today, we're going to start on the campaign. Now, the campaign is actually broken up into these war stories here. You can see I've completed 4 of the 6, and we'll talk about that. Actually, let's just do it now. So, the way war stories work is that instead of having one character that you take across this entire map here of the Western world, as it were, you're going to be taking control of multiple characters. Each one of these things has a self-contained story that has nothing to do with the other stories. It's kind of a neat way of them approaching this whole thing. Instead of having somebody fight World War I on their own, they have a bunch of people who are fighting World War I on their own, or in their own little area with different stakes. It's kind of neat. That said, the mission we're going to do today is very much an introductory mission. It's supposed to get you familiar with the controls and all this other stuff. I actually turned all the hints off on how controls work, so I'll just explain it to you as we go. So, if we zoom in here, I really like that feature where it's got this map here. This is actually continues over into multiplayer as well. When you go into multiplayer, instead of having like a digitized computer screen or something like that, picking where you spawn and all this other stuff, it's got just the map of the world, or the map of the area, from an overhead view like an RTS. It's really actually kind of neat. So, let's jump into this. There's a cutscene here, and I'll see you on the other side of that.
Shining bright above you. Night breezes seem to whisper.
Somebody!
Stay nighty night and kiss me. Just hold me tight and tell me you'll miss me. While I'm alone and blue as can be. Little dream of
We're surrounded! We have to hold this line!
Alright, let's get up to this destroyed-ass building. Let's start on the single player. So, actually, let's go here so we can use our buy. Damn it. LMG. And so, you gotta mention that most of this game actually takes place towards the end of the war, 1917 time period. So, the developers kind of use that as an excuse for why things are a bit more mobile, why you're seeing stuff that was maybe experimental or only used in a couple areas throughout the war entirely. If you like that explanation or not, it doesn't really matter. Can I have 2 of them? Yes, I can. Same exact gun. I've actually done this segment quite a few times, let me tell you. It's not really all that entertaining. Anyways. for ammo. So, what I'm going to tell you here is basically that this segment of the single player is unique in that it's something you're not meant to get through. As it mentioned, you're not expected to survive frontline combat, etc. So that means when you die, get away from that thing, we'll hold on over there. When you die, what's going to happen instead is you're going to get a message of a death screen, how long your character lived, all this other stuff, and by long I mean years, how old they were when they died. And then it switches to the next character in this little rotation. We're just going to go ahead and take our jabs here. You can see you get this little slowdown. And then, so.
We came from all over the world. So many of us thinking this war would be our rite of passage, our great adventure. Let me tell you, it was no adventure.
Oh, that guy almost got snuck up on. So yeah, this game is pretty. I think that's the best way to put it. It is an incredibly pretty game, and it uses that graphical prowess to put together some of the ugliest fucking environments you can imagine. Just the mud and the trenches and the rats and everything else you're going to see throughout the entire game. But it does it in such a way that you're just like constantly impressed by it. I actually upgraded my computer simply so I could play this game in Ultra because I have more money than sense. Now that I don't know if that's really necessary to hear from me, but whatever. Hey, look, bolt action rifle. A lot of people who are all of a sudden World War I fucking experts, when this game came out, they became such. Would point out that bolt-action rifles were the most common type of weapon in World War I for infantry. It was blah, blah, blah. Everyone was equipped with them. The game doesn't really give you... there's only one class in multiplayer that has bolt-action weapons as their standard equipment, and that's the sniper class, which I hate with passion because I'm terrible at sniping. Swing a shovel at this man. That's how I play the sniper class, by the way, is I just swing shots. Actually, it's more a pickaxe. But, anyways. Oh, you jerk. Yeah, your guys can fuck you up. So, yes, flamethrowers, they're special classes in the game, in both single player and multiplayer. But multiplayer is mostly... what they do with single player, I should say, here is they give you a bunch of different scenarios. You're not really doing the same thing too often, though there are chapters that have very similar series of actions happening during them. So, for example, the tank chapter and the flying chapter, I just missed that. Down I go. I was trying to bayonet charge somebody. Let's get our narration here.
New killing machines, like the tank, changed the shape of the war overnight. Luckily, they were mostly on our side. Mostly.
So I'm going to talk over this guy talking, by the way. He is not saying anything super interesting, just shooting things. So yeah, the multiplayer is whatever you want it to be. You can play it with your 4 different characters and all this other stuff. But the single player puts you in different scenarios. There are sneaking chapters, I think everything, except for maybe the Italian chapter. And murder some people here. And the game, at a lot of times, for a game that opens up the way this one did, with people like beating the shit out of each other in a field, and like somebody looking like he's a little shell-shocked, it doesn't pay a lot of time to the brutality of the war, or commenting on it. These are characters who are kind of living and doing what they tend to survive in a lot of ways. And so it doesn't really, I don't know, judge people, I guess. There's a guy who's So, yeah, the game isn't really trying to do commentary on the war 100 years after the fact. It's not really necessary.
Get for that thing! Move, driver! Go over!
It doesn't touch on things like the Armenian genocide. So, as far as I know. So, yeah, there's like... It's not meant to be historically accurate. It's supposed to be a video game. There's supposed to be fun in this thing. And believe me, as brutal as the game can be, it is a ton of fun. Just probably one of the most fun Battlefield games in a long time. It does really well on a lot of fronts, and the bayonet charges and stuff that they added to the game are absolutely fantastic additions. And I look forward to showing them the multiplayer off to everybody and talking a bit more about single player, because I think there's a really a fun component to single player that we'll talk about. But right now we're just going about. And of course, Germans are your standard issue bad guy in the Western Front. You don't take control of any German characters. I feel like
Instead of adventure, we found fear. And in war, the only true equalizer is death.
I feel like we're... Whoa. Congratulations, Lazarus, getting back up like that. I feel like 100 years after the war, we can stand to play as a German. Can't we? Let's pick up. This is probably not the best choice at the time, considering I can't aim down sights as I have a gas mask on. Maybe I'll hit some sweet hip fire, no scopes.
Airship coming down!
Now, if you look up, that's the airship that fired on us earlier, and I died immediately. Interesting. I generally survive a little longer. I usually also have gone prone, and once again, we have a bolt action. If I wanted to, I could probably go pick up... Oh, no, they're not there. I am absolute garbage aim, so that's why I don't like the scout class or bolt actions. Luckily, the single player doesn't use them that much. You can pick them up. Things explode pretty easily. But yeah, you don't... Generally, you have a bevy of... Oh boy, why did I do that? That was bad. Alright. Walk away. If you drop down to your... drop down to prone, you can actually put the flames out pretty quickly. Pro tip, I guess. So I got a bayonet charge in there. Those are fun additions to the game. Let's get another one in. Yeah, this game turns me into a friggin' melee monster at times. I don't know why. It's just a fun thing. People can't be revived from melee. So, yeah, there is going to be a historical component to the LP, a little bit of informative stuff. Now, I'm not a World War I expert by any means, but what we'll be doing is a little different, and I'll explain that on the other side of this cutscene.
They push. We push. Every once in a while, we push hard enough that the light breaks through the clouds. And a world beyond the war glimmers, just out of reach. The war is the world, and the world is the war. But behind every gun sight is a human being. We are those people. We are the jaded, we are the naive, we are the honorable and the criminal. We are the bound for legend and the lost to history. We are the knights of the sky, the ghosts in the desert, and the rats in the mud. These are our stories.
I have an SSD and this still takes like 4 minutes to load up. It's crazy. So we're going to be put back into our overview screen really soon. And so the idea that we're going to go with in terms of education component to this LP is I want to talk to various people who have lived or were born in countries that participated in World War I. Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, France, Russia, Germany, Austria, Hungary. Like basically every country you can think of participated in some way in World War I. Even countries like Portugal, which you'd think Spain stayed neutral, but Portugal actually jumped into the war for a time. Quite a long time, actually. Italy, by the way, also World War I. I have a few people lined up. If you're interested in talking about how World War I is remembered in your country, how the run-up to the war is remembered, let me know. PM me or mention it in the thread, and we'll try to set up a time where we can have a conversation about that. Because I'm personally kind of interested in how different countries talk about this war, because in the US we participated for such a short time that it's really kind of like we showed up and won is how it's approached, and it's not at all what happened. There's obviously different factors in how this all worked, and I'd also like to talk about how the post-war is viewed in a lot of the countries as well. I know that many countries actually had the Spanish flu outbreak immediately afterwards, and so that kind of colors a lot of things. But of course, Germany and Austria and Hungary being punished heavily for World War I had these huge changes in society. Same thing with the Ottoman Empire, of course, which broke up afterwards. And of course, Russia backing out in 1917 and then having its empire break up is a whole thing too. So when you go into these various war stories, let's just show this off.
My granddad fought in the Civil War. Before I left, he told me what it takes to stay alive, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. New machines of war, like the tank, could sometimes change the battlefield overnight. Luckily, they were mostly on our side. Mostly.
Right. So when you get into these different war stories that have multiple parts, what it does is it gives you a map of where you're going, and when you start this thing, it gives you, your opening cutscenes and all this other stuff. Then you go through, get a cutscene between each chapter, and finish this off with another cutscene, usually a pretty big battle at the end too. It's neat. It's, these self-contained campaigns, and I think that's a much smarter way of doing a Battlefield game, especially one that encompasses such a huge conflict as World War I. Now, these last two campaigns over here, The Runner and Nothing Is Written, which I haven't touched yet, those we're going to bring in guests for. But I want to get through these three campaigns by myself in such a way that I can kind of go through them and kind of throw down some thoughts on them. These other ones, from what I understand, they're very interesting, and I want to have people with me to see those happen. But, I mean, this is flying, for fuck's sake. It's not that exciting. This is a really fun campaign, though. So, anyways, if you are somebody who lives in a country that participated in World War I, and I would say if you live in the US and you're watching this, don't worry, I have you covered. But, any country that participated in World War I, especially those that we don't really think of, Greece, Italy, some of the countries in Africa, that is, I know, kind of a far-flung request, but think about it. And, of course, Romania, Belgium, all these places that had some involvement in the First World War. I'd love to hear how that war impacted your, how you guys talk about it today in your country and what you learn about it in school and so on. And if you're not entirely sure, I can come with some facts, I can do some research, and we can talk about those things and what you know of them. But yeah, for the most part, just let me know what you're interested in, and we'll talk about it then. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye.